Good morning, everyone. Such a beautiful day. Thank you for coming out. Today is the beginning of the Christian Holy Week, headed toward Easter. And also tomorrow is the beginning of Passover. And today, here at the monastery, celebrating together are those who have loved us and have nurtured us over the generations, called Qingming Memorial Day, where we remember our dear loved ones who have passed away, all of those who have nurtured us, our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, etc., who have helped us get to this place where we can enjoy the beautiful acreage here in the Missouri River Valley, and to learn together, after calming the mind, to learn together about the Four Noble Truths, the teachings of the Buddha. So, last time I gave a talk on the third noble truth of the cessation of suffering, called Nirodha in Pali. And there were some additional things that I wanted to say about this. And of course, in my usual fashion as a former professor, wanting to go deeper and deeper into the subject, and realizing today that we have so many beginners, people who are here for the first time. If I go into too much detail, I don't want to cause anyone to get distressed trying to learn about how to stop suffering. So I'll do my best to make this as both clear and also some degree of depth and understanding into this subject. So really we're going to head towards, in our topic today, learning about what's called gratification, danger, and escape. So that's what we're going to be looking forward to as we go deeper. So I'll start off with a short verse from called Subrahma's problem, where he is aware that his mind has not been well practiced, and when he passes away, very soon he's going to enter into a very unpleasant realm of lots of suffering. So he goes to the Buddha asking for some help, and he says, "Always anxious is this mind. The mind is always agitated about problems present and future. Please tell me the release from fear." And the Buddha gives a response: "Not apart from awakening and austerity, not apart from sense restraint, not apart from relinquishing all, do I see any safety for living beings." So the Buddha is giving a little bit of instruction here that is related to the third noble truth. What are the Four Noble Truths for those who are maybe not as familiar? The first noble truth is that there's suffering in the world. Hard to dispute this. The second is, what is the cause of this suffering? And the Buddha says that the cause of suffering is that we accumulate more and more cravings. And the more we crave, the more we are subject to suffering. So there is a way out of this suffering. This is called the cessation of suffering. And the way that we do this is we follow what's called the Noble Eightfold Path leading to the cessation of suffering, which is a topic in and of itself. Today, I'm just going to talk about the cessation of suffering. So, everything that we talk about in the Buddhist teachings always relates back to the Four Noble Truths. And for those who came during the winter, they became aware that there are many different ways of looking at the Four Noble Truths, and we're going back and reviewing that. And there was one way of understanding the Four Noble Truths from the original teachings is that there are 12 different aspects. Each one of the Four Noble Truths has the first path of understanding, the second of practice, and the third of full realization. So that would make 12 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. So this teaching that I'm going to reference today is called the 16 Defining Activities of the Four Noble Truths. And this is not part of the original Buddhist suttas, but this comes along a little bit later. This teaching was actually, thanks to the research of a very important Buddhist scholar by the name of Alex Wayman. And for those people who have looked at Buddhist teachings, he's someone who gave a tremendous amount of his life to doing translations of texts that, particularly from the Chinese, that were and Sanskrit that were unknown. So he has traced back these 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths to northern India, where Vasubandhu and his brother Asanga in the 4th century were making this great transition from what was called Sautrantika Buddhism to what was then going to be called Yogacara Buddhism, and that they were delineating and looking at the Four Noble Truths from different points of view, and they came up with this 16 aspects. And both of them wrote about it in different texts. And later the Tibetans, great master Tsongkhapa, who is one of the foundational teachers of the Tibetan tradition, also went into great detail about this, also talking about the opposites of the 16 aspects. So what are these 16 aspects? Well, I have them here on one chart, but we'll have to open them up a little bit so we can look at it briefly and then get into the third level, the third noble truth. So the first noble truth, and I changed the order here just slightly so that we could see that the 3 Dharma seals of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and no self are part of the first noble truth. And then the term emptiness, which eventually becomes part of the 4th Dharma seal of nirvana, which we come to later, is also explained. So when a person begins to understand the first noble truth, indeed we become aware of how all things are impermanent and unsatisfactory. And then perhaps later we begin to see how our taking things very personally and being very personally and selfishly involved also is intricately related to our suffering. In the second noble truth, there is this cause of suffering, and again this gathering or of accumulation of cravings, that the more we crave, the more we want, the more we receive from this sense-based world, the more we want more, and that leads to this continuation of conditions that arise where we are actually trying to end our suffering, but in fact doing the opposite by creating more. And this links to, for those who are versed in the Buddhist teachings, to the 12 links of dependent origination. So our topic, which is the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, I'm going to come back to in more detail, but it has to do with the actual removal of these conditions that allow enlightenment or release from suffering to take place. So I'll come back to this in a moment. And then the fourth part of the path, the Eightfold Path, is the cessation of suffering according to the correct principles with an activity that leads to nirvana and the transcendence of our attachment to life and death. So now I want to come back to the third noble truth. The extinction of our attachments. Nirodha is something that I spoke about in our first meeting on this topic. I'll review it very briefly in a bit. The calming of afflictions, the sublime practice that leads to no discomfort, and finally the escape from all difficult circumstances, which is part of the gratification, danger, and escape topic that I was going to talk about from the beginning. Yes. And a little bit of Tsongkhapa's commentary here is that the third set of cessation is also commented upon in great detail by him as well. Tsongkhapa says that cessation is the covering of a person who has gone astray, and they go astray because they don't believe that there's any liberation. These are the opposites. And instead of calming the mind, they just fill the mind with more and more things that are distracting, and more what are called defilements, the search for just their own pleasure, and not understanding the excellence that is related to letting go of this pleasure seeking. They refute that, and they don't put any effort into trying to stop suffering, and so they never find the exit. Only temporary relief that then leads to more and more distress. So I want to talk a little bit about extinction of physical attachment from Nirodha. And for those of you who know me, you know that I like Chinese characters very much, and many of them are difficult to understand, but if you begin to look inside the characters, you may find some interesting stories because they're picture graphic in many cases. And sometimes if we look at them, we can gain a little bit of understanding as to what the meaning of these terms are. Mie, which is the Chinese word for Nirodha or cessation. Actually, inside the very center of the character is the radical for fire. This represents the burning of our sense desires. And here, the fire is cut off. It's actually cut off in three ways. One, on the right side, there is a tool that is like a cutting tool that will cut off the wick. And then there's a cover that can go on top of the fire to keep it from getting any oxygen. And then finally, water can be put on it. So three ways that we have this extinguishing. So what is it that we're trying to extinguish? Well, there are three levels of things that we need to extinguish. The first being this sense-based attachment to craving, particularly to try to gain gratification from our senses. This is the first level. The second level is that this causes a number of different types of afflictions. And there are different sets of afflictions. There are 3 poisons, and there are 5 afflictions or 6 afflictions, as many as 22 secondary afflictions, and then 108 afflictions. So many different lists of afflictions that go into different levels of the way in which we get attached to things that cause us distress. So that's the second. The third is the most difficult of all, which is the cutting off from our identity of the self, our selfishness. So these are 3 levels of cessation. So how do we calm these afflictions? This is the second of the 4 in this particular set. How do we calm these afflictions? Well, this is quite a practice. So there are many different ways of being able to try to calm these different afflictions, which would include our craving, our greediness, our anger and aversion, our ignorance, our not understanding that what we're seeking in fact is going to cause us to more distress, a pride in the ego, the doubt, and then a number of different types of wrong views. And for those who are a little bit more versed in the teaching, I will just mention the major set of 5 mistaken views. The first being the one that is so difficult to remove, this identity view, this sense of this is me, this is mine, this is who I am, that I am more important than other people, that my own pleasure and happiness comes first. Then there is what is called an extreme view. These are attachments to positions of either eternalism or nihilism. This is a dualistic view that pulls people, nothing exists after I die or I live forever. Again, this attachment to self. And then the erroneous view, where a person does not understand the relationship of cause and effect. They believe, I can do something, but it doesn't necessarily have an effect. I can escape the effects. The view of attachment to our views, holding rigidly that I have an opinion and my opinion is better than other people's opinions. The right or wrong kind of arguments that people get into. And this can happen in political fights, and it can happen even in one's own lay life with the family. Lots of arguments can happen. I like this, no, I like that. And then a view of rigid attachment to precepts, thinking that just by following the rules, that somehow that's enough, I don't have to do anything else, I can get enlightened just if I follow the rules. Well, following the precepts is very important, but there's more to the practice than that, just that. I have to decide how deeply I want to get into some of these subjects. This one is kind of an interesting one, and I'll probably get some good feedback about this from some of our Chinese friends who understand Chinese much better than I do, much better. But the etymology of this word "jing" it was something that I actually meditated on this week, because some other scholars had a different view of this character. On one side, on the right side, we have the hand, where you can see the palm, and then you can see the hand from the other side. So on the right side you have the hand, and on the left side you have actually a word that is probably in this sense just providing some sound to the character perhaps, but it actually is a sprouting of green vegetation. So on one hand they're pulling or separating, and these sprouts that have grown together. So I kind of like this idea of sprouts being separated very gently and calmly by a person kind of separating these entangled threads from each other. So this is my interpretation, but not backed up by the other etymological scholars. So what we want to do is we want to calm ourselves first. We need to be able to calm the mind so that we can in fact benefit from being able to see clearly what to do. If the lake is full of disturbance, very difficult to be able to practice and be able to see clearly how to do this disentangling. So we practice. I'm going to skip over a few things here. So we practice sitting, we practice calmly being in touch with our breath and our body. We do our best to calm the mind so that when we then apply our insight, we can see more clearly what needs to be done, how our afflictions arise, and how we can restrain ourselves, and how we can promote those good qualities that we have. Now the next level is translated in several different ways. Vasubandhu's teaching has it the term that have been used by the Yogacara scholars is called sublimity of no discomfort. The translation of the Sanskrit pranita. The word actually also in the Chinese means excellent or marvelous. So how this fits together is rather a deep topic, and I'm a little bit concerned about going into such a deep topic with people who I don't want to leave behind. And I certainly don't want to get confused myself, since it's a very deep topic. But let's just say that there is this level of ultimate enlightenment, which in the teachings is called Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. And this deep state of full enlightenment is also referred to with the same term that is excellent or marvelous. And in the 52 stages of the Bodhisattva practice, it's the last one in those stages. So sometimes it can be meant to be mysterious or marvelous, wonderful, beautiful, sublime. These are the terms that are used to help us to understand that we're really focusing on how wonderful this practice is. And I'm going to omit some of the etymology here because it goes into some deeper levels of understanding. But one of the ways that this term is used is we can reference some of the Dharma talks that we've done in the past by Master Zhi, who talked about the 6 mysterious Dharma gates, the Liu Miao Fa Man. So this goes through the different stages of how a person will use their breathing and their meditation to go deeper and deeper into the practice so that their mind is no longer disturbed and distressed by external or internal difficulties. So actually, our teacher Caddy has gone into depth of giving a number of different talks, and they'll be online for those people who are interested in this. So finally, we come to the conclusion of the 16-part commentary on part number 3, which is the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. How do you stop suffering? Well, how do you escape from all these difficulties, all these difficult circumstances? So this word in Pali is called nisarana. And this term has to do with, derived from the term of departure, giving up, leaving behind, being freed. The main meaning being escape from samsara, from the cycle of birth and death. This very troublesome world of suffering, how do we escape from it? So the Chinese character that's associated with this, there are a number of them, but this one, Li, is a very good character. And again, it's a little bit of a funny character, and I'm not sure that it actually has the etymological meaning that I want to attach to it. Again, the other etymology scholars don't go into this level. On one side, on the right side, we have a bird. Well, we know the bird. And on the left side, we have a character that derives from the meaning of a character of a monkey, which has evolved into a yak in this character. So, we have a flying yak. And if you've ever seen a yak, you know that it's not going to do a lot of flying. Maybe this is how difficult it is to escape. Maybe we can say it's as difficult to escape from suffering as it is to get a yak to fly. Again, I'll be interested in our Chinese friends giving me some good criticism on this. So, the Buddha talks about this nisarana. He talks about what's called the gratification, the danger, and the escape. So what is the gratification? The gratification is how our senses keep telling us, oh, if I get this, I'm going to be happy. Oh, I see something beautiful. Oh, if I can get that beautiful thing, I'll be happy. I smell something. Oh, if I can just have more of that, I'll be happy. I taste it. Oh, it tastes so good. More of that will make me happy. Touching something, make me happy. Thinking about things, these things will make me happy. So all of these kind of gratification of attachment, this is where a person has this sense-based desire. But they don't see the danger in it. They don't see that there's actually a downside. And they don't then go and investigate how to escape, how to get away from this trouble. So the Buddha says, before my enlightenment, O monks, when I was still a bodhisattva, this thought occurred to me. What is the gratification in the world? What is the danger in the world? And what is the escape from the world? Then I thought, whatever joy and happiness there is in the world, that is the gratification in the world. That the world is impermanent, pervaded by suffering, and subject to change, that is the danger in the world. And the removal and the abandonment of desire and lust for the world, that is the escape from the world. So long, monks, as I did not fully understand, as they really are the world's gratification as gratification, the danger is danger, and the escape from the world is escape, for as long as I did not claim that I had understood. I did not have this unsurpassed perfect enlightenment. And then when I had this understanding, then I was able to claim that I was awakened to the unsurpassed, perfect enlightenment, the Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. So it was with this great understanding that led to his enlightenment. So this is discussed in a number of important discourses. This is the Maha Dukkha Kanda Sutta. Maha meaning great, dukkha suffering, and Kanda the aggregates. Yes. And so again, he talks about how we try to gratify all of the different things, our form, our feelings, our mind, our mental formations, our habit energy, and our consciousness, and we get stuck. So he gives the same teachings, and Bhikkhu Bodhi gives a wonderful commentary on this that I will suggest that people may want to read about how it is that those who enjoy the sense pleasures without being tied to them, seeing the danger and aware of the escape, this is the second of these that the Buddha declares as superior. Yes. And how this attachment to self becomes the major part of our teaching. Bhikkhu Bodhi says it is as the argument unfolds, the Buddha will show that the essential key to liberation, the key to the monks, is the teaching of anatta, of non-self, or egolessness. So this is the final step of the full liberation of the escape. There's another teaching called the Lion's Roar. So I've read the Lion's Roar many times, and I always keep looking for the Lion's Roar. There's no lion in the Lion's Roar. And this time when I was studying this sutta in preparation for being with you today, I ran across a very good commentary with Bhikkhu Bodhi, where he talks about the lion's roar is when the Buddha declares, "Only here." So, understanding what is meant by only here in this context means that only here in the Buddhist teachings will you hear about the Four Noble Truths. Only here will you understand the gratification, the danger, and the complete escape. So when I read this, I felt very good inside. Finally, I know what the lion's roar is. Yes. So there's much more, probably another several Dharma talks worth here, but I have to let go. Yes. And so I'm going to just talk about the idea of sukha. Sukha is happiness, and we want to wish ourselves and all beings happiness. This relief from suffering. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separated from the altruistic joy which is free from suffering. And may all beings dwell in the great equanimity which is free from attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Thank you.